Let's dive into useDebugValue, a React 18 hook that enhances your debugging experience. Here's a simple custom hook, use window size, without useDebugValue. This hook lets us dynamically track the size of the browser window. Whenever the window is resized, it updates the size state with the new window dimensions. It's a straightforward way to keep our UI responsive, but imagine if we could make its inner workings clearer during debugging. That's where useDebugValue comes into play. In our project, we're adding a cool little feature using something called useDebugValue. It's part of a custom hook we're making called useOnlineStatus, which checks if you're connected to the internet. By sprinkling in useDebugValue, it gets labeled as online or offline based on your connection status. Super handy, right? This way, when we're debugging in React DevTools, we can instantly see our hook state without digging too deep. It's like a quick glance tells us everything. Optimizing performance in our React hooks doesn't have to be complex. Take our useOnlineStatus hook, for instance. We've smartly included a last checked date to keep track of our online status checks. To avoid unnecessary computations, we use useDebugValue with a clever formatter function. This function converts our date only when the DevTools inspect this hook. By doing this, we ensure that our app remains swift and efficient, sparing those precious CPU cycles for when they're truly needed. Imagine you're crafting a custom hook to juggle an array of objects, right? When handling such complex structures, especially in shared libraries, clarity becomes key. By using useDebugValue, you can neatly summarize the hook state, simply displaying the count of items as a snapshot. So, if your component swings into action, you instantly know it's dealing with, say, 3 items, without diving into the weeds of the data itself. A nifty way to keep things tidy and understandable, don't you think? Understanding when to add debug values is key, especially when dealing with data like customer information. Let's say we're fetching customer data based on their ID. If this data is large or complex, using useDebugValue to debug could actually slow things down without really making things clearer for us. It's like trying to read a book while someone's flipping the pages too fast, neither helpful nor enjoyable. So, in cases like this, it's better to skip the debug values to keep things running smoothly. In this part, we're taking a deeper dive into hooks by integrating useDebugValue with more complex ones. Imagine creating a custom hook that uses both useReducer for state management and useEffect for side effects, such as automatically incrementing a counter. By adding useDebugValue, we can easily monitor the internal state, like checking if the counter is positive or not. This trick gives us a clearer insight into our component's behavior over time, making debugging a breeze. Navigating common pitfalls with useDebugValue can get tricky. For instance, placing the hook within conditionals, like checking if you're online, then calling useDebugValue? Big no. That breaks the sacred rules of hooks. Consistency is key. Instead, always call useDebugValue at the top level of your custom hook, and use a ternary operator to toggle the debug value. This way, you keep your hook's behavior predictable and in line with best practices. Enhancing shared libraries with useDebugValue offers a game changer in debugging. Imagine a complex hook like useFetch in our library. It fetches data and manages loading states. By implementing useDebugValue, we tag its status as loading, or loaded, providing immediate insight into what's happening behind the scenes. This small touch elevates the debugging experience, making it easier to understand and troubleshoot for anyone using the library. It's like giving users a flashlight in a dark room. Leveraging custom formatter functions for enhanced debugging can be a real game changer. Let me tell you about this React hook, useUserData. It pulls up complex user data like name, age, and email. But here's the cool part. It uses a formatter function within useDebugValue to simplify this data into something more digestible, such as just the user's name and age. This makes your debug information not just useful, but also easy to read and understand. Remember, clarity is key when you're knee-deep in code. To wrap up our chat on useDebugValue, it's all about making our custom hooks easier to debug. By adding labels, it guides us through complex internal states without having to dive deep into the code. While it's super useful, remember not to go overboard, especially in hooks where performance is key. Always aim for clear, meaningful labels that convey the essence at a glance. It's like adding a clear, user-friendly map to your code's treasure hunt.